this first item's fairly straightforward, but about 20% of people who get a set of items like this, on this second item, they get confused. And instead of putting the town or city that they live in here, they write the number of years they've lived in their city, because they're thinking, okay, number of years lived in Idaho, okay, your city or town, number of years lived in your city or town. Well, that's not what it's asking. It's asking what is your city or town. And then this last item is your county. And as the mistake I made in the last video was, county looks a lot like country, and so a small percentage of people will actually list their country here, not their county. So better ways to write these items are to make them into complete sentences. How many years have you lived in Idaho? In what city or town do you live? And in what Idaho county do you live? You're being very explicit and you're using complete sentences. We mentioned this in a previous class using double negatives. You want to make sure that yes means yes and no means no. You don't want people to have to say no in order to mean yes, or have to disagree in order to agree. So you can see this item. Do you favor or oppose not allowing the states to raise taxes without approval of 60% of the voters? This is all over the map. We've got oppose, we've got not allowing, we've got without. We've got like a triple negative here. So figuring out this item and how to answer is next to impossible. Here's another one. I can't stop thinking about the war in Afghanistan. So if I can't stop thinking about it, what does that mean? It means I think about it all the time. So it's a very confusing item, and there's really no reason to ask it in this way. An improvement would be I keep thinking about the war in Afghanistan, or even better, how often do you think about it? In this case, we're using a frequency response scale. And we're using a question in the stem. Here's another one. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Teachers should not be required to supervise their students during recess. So if you answer yes to this, what does that really mean? So make sure yes means yes and no means no. And here's one from the Equal Opportunity survey that I showed you last time. Assuming I could stay until retirement, I do not see many reasons to do so. It's a confusing item. So avoid double negatives when you're creating items. You want to avoid unfamiliar terms, AUA, and avoid jargon. AUA is avoid unfamiliar acronyms. So in general, you want to spell out all acronyms the first time that they're used, with the caveat that some acronyms actually make more sense than the full written out phrase. So things like AIDS and FBI, people know what the FBI is. They might not know it's the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So there are a small number of acronyms where the acronym might actually make more sense. So just be aware of that. Double-barreled items. This is the most common mistake that people make when they're creating surveys. They write double-barreled items, and this is because a lot of times we talk with ands and ors. So here's an example. How happy are you with your phone company's rates and customer service? Well, those are two different things, right? Rates and customer service. So if somebody answers completely happy, what does that mean? What are they happy with, the rates or the customer service? Here's an example from my own research. I had an item that said, when I study for this course, I write brief summaries of the main ideas from the readings and the online discussions. So this was an item about how students study in online courses, and I had this item, and you can see it's a double-barreled item because it asks about readings and online discussions. And when I analyzed the data from this item, I found that it was problematic. So I actually had 6 items, all designed to measure this construct I was calling elaboration. And that item was item 40, which is right here. So this is a correlation matrix. You can see I've got ones along the diagonal, and these are the bivariate correlations between all the items. So if all 6 of these items are meant to measure elaboration, they should all be positively correlated. But you can see item 40 is negatively correlated with several of the items. That tells you that there's a problem. And when I did the analysis, I found out that the correlation, the Cronbach's alpha for these 6 items was 0.54. That means on average they correlated at about 0.5, which is really low. You really want your Cronbach's alpha to be above 0.75. And so I knew I had a problem. And SPSS does a nice job of telling you, hey, if you get rid of item 40, your alpha will go up to 0.797. So I knew right away that this item was a problem. This is just a long way of saying, don't write double-barreled items, not because I tell you they're bad, but because it actually messes up the empirical data that you'll get from an item like this. So you can also have double-barreled items in the STEM. That's what I showed you, right? When I study for this course, I write brief summaries of the main ideas. When I study for this course, I write brief summaries of the main ideas for online discussions and one for reading. So you can simply break that item into two, and you'll get much better data. So that's an example in the STEM. Here's an example in the actual response options. What is your occupational status? You can see all these options that are not mutually exclusive, right? You could be a full-time, you could be a part-time student, and you could be a part-time employee. So you want to break things like this up into two questions. One that asks about occupational status and one that asks about student status. So this double-barreled problem can occur both in the STEM and in the response options. And then finally, make sure your answers are mutually exclusive and exhaustive. So this is another case where you're mixing up where you heard about something from when you heard about it. So this makes sense to break these up. You heard it on the radio and it was when you were at work or driving home. So this issue of double-barreled items can occur in the STEM and the response options. And last but not least, avoid blanks in the middle of items. This kind of goes back to the issue of writing complete sentences. This is a great item writing piece of advice for writing test items. You never want to have a blank in the middle of a sentence. It's just hard to read. It's not very conversational. So instead of saying I spend blank of my free time reading, you might just ask, how much of your free time do you spend reading? It makes much more sense and it's much easier to answer. So that's all I have for item writing. Take a look at the readings. There's some more guidelines there, and happy writing.